A single safety failure unleashes a silent, choking cloud that devastates a city overnight. A botched test creates a nuclear disaster that releases 400 times the radioactivity of an atomic bomb. These aren't movie plots. They are real events where humanity's mistakes created unimaginable horror. We are constantly at risk, from improperly stored chemicals to ecosystem-destroying oil spills. These catastrophes serve as grim reminders of the responsibility that comes with our own creations. Today we're counting down the top 10 man-made doomsday events. 10. Exxon Valdez oil spill. Our list begins with a name that became synonymous with environmental catastrophe, the Exxon Valdez. In March 1989, a massive oil tanker strayed from its shipping lane in Alaska's pristine Prince William Sound and struck Bligh Reef. The error was agonizingly human. While there were allegations the ship's captain had been drinking, he was in his cabin at the time. The primary cause of the grounding was an overtired and underqualified third mate left at the helm, who made a critical navigational error. The result was a gash in the tanker's hull that spilled nearly 11 million gallons of crude oil into the Sound. The thick black sludge spread relentlessly, blackening over 1,300 miles of one of the planet's most untouched coastlines. The images were apocalyptic. Beaches that were once havens for wildlife became death zones. News channels broadcast heartbreaking images of oil-soaked sea otters and birds unable to fly, symbolizing a kind of oily doom brought on by human carelessness. The spill killed hundreds of thousands of seabirds, thousands of sea otters, and countless fish. Decades later, the ecosystem remains fragile. While some species have recovered, others, like a specific pod of orcas and populations of herring, have not. Pollution remains embedded deep in the Alaskan coast, a persistent reminder that a single act of negligence can inflict wounds on the natural world that may never fully heal. 9. The Great Smog of London. Number 9 on our list turned one of the world's greatest cities into a blind, suffocating trap for 5 straight days. In December 1952, London disappeared. A perfect storm of human action and natural phenomena created what became known as the Great Smog. For centuries, London was known for its pea soupers, thick fogs made worse by coal burning. But in the winter of 1952, it became something far more sinister. A bitter cold snap led Londoners to burn huge amounts of low-quality, high-sulfur coal. At the same time, a weather event known as an anticyclone settled over the city, trapping all that smoke at ground level. The result was a dense, yellow-black, sulfuric smog that descended on the city like a shroud. It turned day into night, halting all transport as visibility dropped to mere feet. People stumbled blindly through the streets, unable to see where they were going. The smog was so thick it seeped indoors, closing theatres because audiences couldn't see the stage. But this was more than an inconvenience, it was a killer. The air was thick with pollutants that attacked the lungs of anyone who breathed it. Hospitals were overwhelmed. In just 5 days, initial reports estimated that 4,000 people had died. However, modern analysis that includes deaths in the following weeks and months suggests the total toll was likely between 10,000 and 12,000 people, with over 100,000 more falling ill. The Great Smog was so horrific it forced a political reckoning, leading to the Clean Air Act of 1956, a landmark piece of environmental legislation born from a vision of a city that had poisoned itself. 8. Minamata mercury. Poisoning. Our 8th entry isn't a single explosive event, but a slow, creeping horror that unfolded over decades. From the 1930s until 1968, the Chiso Corporation, a chemical factory in Minamata, Japan, systematically discharged wastewater containing tons of methyl mercury into Minamata Bay. This highly toxic compound worked its way up the food chain, accumulating in the fish and shellfish that were the staple diet for the local population. The human error here was one of deliberate criminal negligence. The company knew its waste was poisonous. In-house experiments showed that cats fed the factory's wastewater developed severe neurological symptoms, earning the condition the nickname dancing cat fever, as the animals convulsed and died. Yet, the company continued to dump its toxic waste. By the 1950s, the horror began to appear in people. residents started exhibiting terrifying symptoms: uncontrollable spasms, loss of motor function, and severe sensory deprivation. What became known as Minamata disease was a neurological nightmare. Victims' bodies twisted into grotesque shapes as their lives were consumed by pain. Pregnant women who ate contaminated fish gave birth to children with severe congenital defects. Official figures certify over 2,280 victims, though the true number of those affected is likely in the tens of thousands. For years, the company denied responsibility, and the government was slow to act. Minamata stands as a chilling case study of corporate greed and a slow-motion toxic apocalypse. 7. Fukushima Daiichi nuclear disaster. At number 7, we have a catastrophe born from a combination of nature's fury and human overconfidence. In March 2011, a massive earthquake off the coast of Japan triggered a devastating tsunami. While the earthquake was a natural event, the nuclear disaster at the Fukushima Daiichi power plant was a direct result of human design flaws. The plant's seawalls were too low to withstand a tsunami of that magnitude, and critical emergency generators, needed to cool the reactors, were located in low-lying areas where they were quickly flooded. With the cooling systems down, 3 of the plant's reactors began to overheat. This led to a series of core meltdowns and powerful hydrogen explosions that blew the roofs off the reactor buildings. These blasts vented radioactive material into the atmosphere, spreading contamination across the landscape and into the Pacific Ocean. The world watched in horror at the smoldering, skeletal remains of the reactor buildings. Over 160,000 people were forced to evacuate, leaving behind ghost towns. While no deaths have been directly attributed to acute radiation sickness from the accident, the psychological trauma and disruption of the evacuation have led to over 2,300 disaster-related deaths, mainly among the elderly. The cleanup of Fukushima is an unprecedented challenge, expected to take decades and cost hundreds of billions of dollars. The disaster served as a brutal reminder that even advanced technology is vulnerable to human miscalculation. 6. Gulf War oil spill. Number 6 on our list was no accident. It was a deliberate act of environmental warfare. In January 1991, during the Persian Gulf War, Iraqi forces intentionally released massive quantities of crude oil into the Persian Gulf to try and block a potential US marine landing. They opened the valves of oil tankers and sabotaged pipelines, unleashing what is considered the largest intentional oil spill in history. Estimates suggest as much as 11 million barrels of oil, more than 10 times the amount from the Exxon Valdez, poured into the Gulf. The scale of the devastation was staggering. The sea literally turned black, creating a slick that covered thousands of square miles. The oil-choked coastal habitats killing whales, sea turtles, and tens of thousands of birds. At the same time, retreating Iraqi forces set fire to over 700 Kuwaiti oil wells, creating immense plumes of black smoke that turned day into night and created a vision of environmental Armageddon. Much of the oil was left to evaporate or sink. While some early studies predicted a swift recovery, later research revealed far more severe long-term damage. Oil penetrated deep into coastal sediments, where its toxicity lingered for years, decimating salt marshes and mangrove forests. The Gulf War oil spill stands as a terrifying example of how the environment itself can be weaponized. 5. Deepwater Horizon oil spill. Coming in at number 5 is the largest accidental marine oil spill in history, a disaster that unfolded live on television. On April 20th, 2010, the Deepwater Horizon, an offshore drilling rig operated by BP in the Gulf of Mexico, suffered a catastrophic blowout. A cascade of technical failures and flawed procedures, driven by a corporate culture that prioritized speed over safety, allowed high-pressure methane gas to erupt onto the rig and ignite. The explosion was immense, engulfing the rig in a fireball and killing 11 crew members. 2 days later, the rig sank, leaving the wellhead on the ocean floor gushing uncontrollably. For 87 agonizing days, an estimated 4.9 million barrels, that's nearly 210 million gallons, of crude oil spewed into the Gulf of Mexico. The underwater cameras broadcasting the leak became a symbol of humanity's inability to contain its own creation. The oil eventually contaminated over 1,300 miles of coastline from Texas to Florida. The environmental toll was staggering. Over 1 million birds were estimated to have died, along with dolphins, sea turtles, and countless fish. The use of chemical dispersants, meant to break up the oil, created a toxic soup that poisoned the food chain. The spill crippled the Gulf's fishing and tourism industries for years. A decade later, the effects are still being felt, with some marine populations struggling to recover and oil residues altering life in the deep ocean. 4. 9/11 terrorist attacks. The event at number 4 is seared into the collective consciousness of the modern world. On September 11, 2001, Al-Qaeda hijackers crashed 2 airliners into the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center in New York City. The impacts ignited massive fireballs, but the true doomsday moment came when the 110-story skyscrapers, their structures weakened by the heat, collapsed. The sight of the towers crumbling to the ground was surreal and horrifying. They fell in on themselves, creating enormous clouds of pulverized concrete, glass, and asbestos that engulfed Lower Manhattan. The dust choked the streets, turning day into a grey, toxic twilight as people fled in terror. In total, 2,977 people were killed in the attacks in New York at the Pentagon and in a field in Pennsylvania, making it the deadliest terrorist act in world history. But the disaster didn't end that day. The toxic dust that blanketed the area was a cocktail of carcinogens. In the years since, thousands of first responders, cleanup crews and survivors have been diagnosed with respiratory illnesses and cancers. Shockingly, the number of people who have died from 9/11 related illnesses has now surpassed the number killed on the day of the attacks, a tragic toll that continues to climb. September 11th was a doomsday created not by accident, but by calculated hatred. 3. Beirut Port Explosion. Our third event turned a vibrant port city into a wasteland in the blink of an eye. On August 4th, 2020, a fire broke out in a warehouse at the port of Beirut in Lebanon. Inside that warehouse was a ticking time bomb that had been ignored for nearly 7 years. 2,750 tons of ammonium nitrate, a highly explosive chemical stored with shocking negligence. Warnings from officials about the danger had been repeatedly ignored. At 6:08 p.m. local time, the fire reached the ammonium nitrate, triggering one of the largest non-nuclear explosions in history. It detonated with the force of over a kiloton of TNT, generating a massive mushroom cloud and a supersonic shockwave that ripped through Beirut. It leveled the port and shattered windows miles away. The sound was heard as far away as Cyprus, over 150 miles across the Mediterranean Sea. The aftermath was a vision of post-apocalyptic ruin. At least 218 people were killed, more than 7,000 were injured, and an estimated 300,000 people were left homeless. Residents stumbled through streets filled with rubble and fire. To this day, the investigation into the blast has been repeatedly stalled, with many suspecting political interference. The Beirut explosion is a horrifying testament to how catastrophic bureaucratic neglect can be, where years of incompetence culminated in a single earth-shattering moment. 2. Bhopal gas tragedy. At number 2 is the world's worst industrial accident, a silent cloud of death that descended on a sleeping city. On the night of December 2nd, 1984, in Bhopal, India, a pesticide plant run by Union Carbide experienced a catastrophic failure. A series of critical safety systems had been disabled or were malfunctioning, reportedly as a cost-cutting measure. Water entered a tank containing over 40 tons of methyl isocyanate, MIC, a highly toxic gas. This complete disregard for safety triggered a runaway chemical reaction. A safety valve burst, releasing a dense, toxic cloud into the night air. Heavier than air, the gas silently blanketed the densely populated neighborhoods surrounding the plant. Thousands were poisoned as they slept. Those who awoke were met with a burning sensation in their lungs and fled in panic, but running only caused them to inhale more of the poison. The immediate death toll was horrific. Official figures were in the thousands, but other estimates suggest 8,000 or more died within the first few days alone. But the tragedy was far from over. In the years that followed, the death toll has continued to climb, with some activist and research groups estimating it to be over 22,000. More than 500,000 survivors were left with chronic health problems, including blindness, lung damage, and neurological disorders. The Bhopal disaster remains a harrowing symbol of corporate negligence. 1. Chernobyl nuclear disaster. And at number 1, the event that defines man-made doomsday, the Chernobyl disaster. On April 26, 1986, technicians at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in Soviet Ukraine conducted a reckless and poorly designed safety test. In a fatal combination of arrogance and flawed reactor design, operators deliberately disabled safety systems and pushed Reactor 4 into an unstable state, and leaving the city of Pripyat a haunting ghost town. The long-term death toll from Chernobyl is intensely debated. While a UN report projects up to 4,000 deaths from long-term cancer, other estimates range into the tens of thousands. Chernobyl burned the concepts of nuclear fallout, exclusion zones, and invisible death into the global psyche. It demonstrated with horrifying clarity humanity's ability to unleash an apocalypse that could poison the Earth for centuries. Conclusion. From the silent poison of Bhopal to the radioactive fire of Chernobyl, these events paint a terrifying picture of our own fallibility. They are monuments to negligence, greed, and arrogance. Each disaster born from human mistakes carries a vital lesson: that safety can't be a compromise, that accountability is essential, and that the power we wield comes with immense responsibility. Learning from these doomsday events isn't just about remembering the past, it's about safeguarding our future. Which of these events do you think was the most terrifying man-made disaster? Let us know in the comments below. And if you found this video informative, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more deep dives into the events that shaped our world. Thanks for watching.